Welcome. Today we delve into a clandestine World War II operation that could have changed the course of history. Imagine a stealthy convoy of submarines and heavily armed ships moving through the darkness, seemingly unstoppable, until a new, deadly British weapon was secretly unleashed. But what if the Germans had no idea that the Allies had developed a flying artillery capable of piercing a submarine's hull from nearly 2,000 yards away? Could a cigarette-making company's obscure engineering innovations have led to a revolutionary anti-tank gun mounted on a bomber? Did the British really convert their Mosquito fighters into flying tanks, capable of devastating targets at unprecedented distances? And how did these technological marvels, born out of industrial curiosity and wartime necessity, threaten to turn the tide against the Axis naval defenses? All these facts, so disparate and shocking, pose a single gripping question. What secrets were hidden within this deadly convergence of innovation and strategy, and how close did they come to altering the fate of the war? In this video, we will trace the origins of this groundbreaking weapon, separate fact from fiction, and reveal the astonishing truth behind a clandestine effort that could have made aircraft into floating artillery platforms, transforming the skies into battlefield giants. The journey begins right now as we uncover the story behind the most daring technological leap of World War II. On the morning of March 27th in the year 1944, at precisely 6 o'clock hours, Captain Lieutenant Wilhelm Steinberg stood firmly on the bridge of his submarine, designated 960, as it stealthily navigated through the thick darkness of the pre-dawn hours. His vessel was steadily advancing toward La Palace, a clandestine area of strategic importance, shrouded in the quiet gloom of the early morning. Flanking his submarine on either side were two heavily reinforced Breer vessels, their concrete-laden hulls providing a formidable barrier of protection. These secondary ships appeared almost like silent guardians, guarding their precious cargo through the cloak of night. Additionally, located within this convoy were four M-class minesweepers, their presence creating a defensive perimeter that served to ward off any potential threats. Their armament was prominent, multiple 20mm and 37mm anti-aircraft guns, perched atop the vessels, arranged in an intimidating array that bristled in the dim morning light. These gun emplacements were primed to unleash a relentless barrage of steel, standing ready to thwart any aircraft daring enough to swoop in for an attack. The scene was tense, yet meticulous, a carefully orchestrated defense poised amidst the gathering darkness. Unbeknownst to Steinberg and his crew, however, a formidable arsenal of British aircraft was already converging on this convoy's position. 6 Mosquito bombers, renowned for their speed and agility, along with 2 specially modified Setsi versions, were silently closing in from an altitude of approximately 5,000 feet. These aircraft carried a devastating payload, 57mm Mullins guns, expertly loaded with armor-piercing shells specifically designed to disable Axis ships and vessels from a safe distance beyond the reach of typical anti-aircraft fire. Their flight path was calculated carefully to stay outside the effective range of German defenses, and they would have preferred to strike from an altitude that maximized their advantage. The convoy had been sailing through the night, buoyed by a false sense of security derived from an innovative doctrinal approach implemented by Admiral Karl Donat. This new defensive strategy sought to strengthen the convoy's protection by pairing submarines fiercely guarded by heavily armed escort vessels, thereby creating overlapping fields of anti-aircraft fire, an interlocking shield that would complicate any attacking force's efforts to succeed. The doctrine had been forged in the crucible of the previous year, 1943, when the Allies suffered catastrophic losses. That year, lone submarines and ships were often caught on the surface by relentless aerial attacks. But what Steinberg and his fellow commanding officers did not realize was that the British had secretly developed a weapon expressly designed to counter this very approach. A unique innovation had emerged, one that mounted a highly specialized anti-tank weapon in the nose of their most advanced twin-engine fighter bombers, the Mosquito. This adaptation transformed the aircraft into a flying artillery platform, equipped to engage targets at a remarkable distance of roughly 1,800 yards. This capability placed them well outside the effective range of the German 20mm anti-aircraft guns, which started to lose their accuracy beyond 2,000 meters, and were practically helpless against the faster-moving aircraft at much greater distances. The genesis of this groundbreaking weapon dated back to 1943, when the British Air Ministry first recognized the limitations posed by German U-boats attempting to defend themselves against aerial assault. Previously, U-boats like U-441 had been converted into heavily armed platforms, known as UAC-1 in particular, that boasted double-quadruple 20mm autocannons and a 37mm gun. These modifications created floating anti-aircraft batteries capable of unleashing devastating bursts of fire against approaching attack aircraft. Under such conditions, enemy planes had been forced to approach within a mere 500 meters if they hoped to deploy depth charges or launch rockets, ranges that made even the most well-protected coastal command aircraft vulnerable to concentrated automatic fire. The critical breakthrough came from an unlikely source. The Mullins Company of Peterborough, a firm originally dedicated to manufacturing machinery for making cigarettes. Over the years, the company had developed sophisticated mechanisms for automatic feeding in their production lines, which caught the attention of technology innovators. Desmond Mullins and his engineering team realized that with some adaptation, this advanced feeding technology could be repurposed into a highly efficient autoloading system, designed specifically for the British Army's 65mm QF 6-pounder anti-tank gun. Their concept was to convert a manually operated weapon into a semi-automatic cannon capable of firing approximately 55 rounds per minute, with a feasible automatic feed mechanism. When examining the possibilities for aircraft installation, engineers at de Havilland, based in Hatfield, soon focused their interest on whether this new autoloading system could be integrated into a Mosquito fighter bomber. Their initial evaluations sought to determine if the aircraft could bear the added weight of the converted gun and ammunition, and to assess how effectively it could be employed during combat. The undertaking of deploying a formidable weapons system on the aircraft presented numerous technical challenges that tested the ingenuity and resilience of the engineers involved. The most significant obstacle was the installation of an extraordinarily heavy artillery piece, weighing in at approximately 1,180 pounds when fully loaded, with a barrel that extended prominently forward beyond the aircraft's nose. This configuration necessitated the complete removal of the standard armament, specifically the 42mm Hispano cannons that normally equipped the fighter-bomber variant. As a result, the aircraft was left with only 2 Browning machine guns, each caliber 3003, dedicated to targeting and aiming purposes. The integration of such an immense weapon was a delicate balancing act, requiring meticulous modifications to maintain the aircraft's structural integrity and aerodynamic stability. Despite these formidable challenges, the strategic benefits appeared to outweigh the engineering difficulties. Military tests demonstrated that this substantial caliber shell, a 57mm round, possessed impressive destructive capabilities. Remarkably, its shell could pierce the sturdy pressure hull of a submarine through nearly 2 feet of water at a range of approximately 4,000 meters. This performance far surpassed the effective engagement distances of German anti-aircraft gunners, who found it challenging to target such fast-moving aircraft from land or sea, especially at extended ranges. Inspired by these promising results, an initial prototype aircraft, converted from a Mosquito FB Mark VI, identified by its serial number HJ732, began a series of rigorous firing trials in June of 1943 at the de Havilland Aircraft Factory. During these trials, the test pilot, Pat Fillingham, observed that firing the massive gun produced a violent jolt that caused the aircraft to buck and tremble significantly. The recoil from the heavy weapon exerted a strong rearward force, which was so intense that rivets in the forward fuselage sheared under the strain. These issues prompted the engineers to reinforce the fuselage with additional structural members and to incorporate a large hydraulic buffer, a substantial damping system positioned beneath the gun that absorbed some of the recoil forces. This upgrade was visually evident, causing a distinct bulge along the aircraft's underside where the hydraulic buffer and reinforcements were installed. Further modifications involved adding roughly 900 pounds of armor plating around critical areas such as the engines and cockpit floor, effectively boosting the aircraft's resilience against the return fire of heavily armed submarines, which now represented the primary targets in the evolving battlefield scenario. Meanwhile, Squadron Leader Tony Phillips, commanding No. 248 Squadron, had been flying Mosquito aircraft in operations over the Bay of Biscay since December of 1943. His squadron had transitioned from original low-level attack profiles, used primarily for strafing and bombing, just as German U-boat wolf packs began operating more boldly in convoy formations, accompanied by surface escorts, cruisers, and battleships, marking a significant tactical evolution. These changes rendered traditional low-level attack tactics, especially those involving the release of depth charges, highly dangerous and often suicidal due to the increased threat from aerial defenses and ship-based anti-aircraft artillery. By March of 1944, the arrival of new variants equipped with the modified larger guns opened fresh tactical avenues. These upgraded Mosquitoes could now engage enemies from longer distances, out to several thousand meters, where the navigation, aim, and firing accuracy of German flak crews were significantly diminished. German anti-aircraft defenses had historically been shaped by their experiences in the relatively confined and strategically vital Mediterranean theater. Particularly Hauptmann Friedrich Christensen, who commanded an anti-aircraft battery in occupied France, trained his gunners thoroughly to engage low-flying aircraft at ranges under 1,000 meters. At such distances, the 20mm Flak 38 gun could effectively track and hit targets moving at speeds approaching 300 miles an hour, providing a sweet spot for the gunners where accuracy was maximized. However, the effectiveness of these defenses was drastically reduced when the engagement distances extended beyond this range. When aircraft stayed at or beyond 1,500 meters, the trajectory calculations, the lead angles necessary for successful shooting, increased exponentially. Gunners had to account for extensive lead, often at extreme angles, such that even minor misjudgments or miscalculations resulted in missed targets. The Italian Navy, too, had confronted similar challenges during their convoy battles off the coast of Sicily. Captain de Corvetta Giuseppe Fontana, commanding the escort vessel Orsa, discovered the limitations of their Brada 20mm guns. Although capable of creating a dense curtain of fire, a fire fountain, these weapons were rarely successful in hitting British Beaufort torpedo bombers when they released their torpedoes from distances greater than around 1,000 meters. This realization prompted the Italian Naval Command to seek more effective anti-aircraft artillery, and soon they requested German 37mm guns, capable of reaching out to approximately 4,800 meters. Yet even these more potent weapons faced difficulties in engaging high-speed aircraft approaching from oblique angles within the confined, heavily engineered Captain Hans Rudolf Rosing, who commanded the 2nd U-boat flotilla, had been watching with growing unease as the tide of Allied anti-submarine warfare tactics steadily evolved during the course of the conflict. In his war diary, he recorded that British aircraft seemed to have developed an almost uncanny capability to locate and identify U-boat submarines, even when these submarines traveled under the cover of heavy escorts and supposed concealment measures. This unsettling discovery was particularly troubling because it suggested a significant gap in their defensive capabilities, and he noted with concern that British reconnaissance planes appeared to possess a near-infinitely adaptive edge. What added to the tension was the fact that the Germans remained largely unaware that their coastal command was benefiting from ultra-intercepts, highly classified signals intelligence that provided them with detailed and precise routing information about Allied operations. This secret source of intelligence made the Allied position much more dangerous, as their aircraft movements and convoy routes could be tracked with startling accuracy. Despite this known intel advantage, what troubled Rosing even more was a troubling report from the previous patrol of one of his submarines, U-960. The patrol had observed British aircraft mindfully maintaining their distance from the defensive convoy, seemingly conducting their own reconnaissance missions rather than preparing for an imminent attack. These aircraft, thought to be Mosquito bombers or similar types, did not close in for an attack, but instead kept a wary, cautious distance, as if testing and gathering intelligence without revealing their intentions. In addition to the threat posed by the air patrols, the Germans had their own scheduled engagement against this emerging aerial threat, planned for the 10th of May in the year 1944. The target was the submarine I-29, carrying valuable technical secrets from Germany. This included advanced Walter rocket engines and Enigma cipher machines vital to their intelligence efforts. To protect this crucial vessel, German naval forces had assigned destroyers Z-23 and Z-H-1, and the operation would be supported by Junkers J-88 fighters, which were tasked with defending the convoy from aerial threats. Commander Takazu Kanashi, commanding Urwaler 29, was unaware of the full extent of the peril approaching, including the capabilities of the aircraft and other weapons that would ultimately face his escorts. As he observed through the periscope, a formation of British Mosquito aircraft approached with intent, and then, in a scene that seemed almost impossible, opened fire from what appeared at first to be a prohibitively distant range. The destruction commenced with the sharp crack of 57mm shells pounding against the hull of the destroyer, producing splinters that sprayed across the water's surface. Without warning, one of the Junkers J-88 aircraft experienced a catastrophic failure when it suddenly shed its port engine. It was torn completely away by a single shot from squadron leader Phillips, an act that deepened the chaos beneath the skies. The scene was a stark reminder of how intense and unpredictable aerial combat had become, even against targets assumed to be well defended. On U-960's bridge that early March morning, the commanding officer Steinberg issued strict orders to his lookouts, emphasizing the importance of remaining vigilant as the convoy approached the narrow, mine-swept channel that led into La Pallas. The convoy itself was protected by 4 M-class minesweepers, deployed at a distance of 500 meters apart to maintain proper formation as they moved through perilous waters. Waters that had been heavily mined by British aircraft for months. At the front of the line, 2 spare Breer vessels with reinforced hulls, designed explicitly to absorb potential mine explosions, led the parade of ships. These vessels had hulls strengthened with concrete, further indicating the lethal environment into which they advance. The guns aboard these vessels, 20mm and 37mm autocannons, were kept manned and ready, their ammunition belts loaded with a mixture of high explosive and armor-piercing rounds. These weapons were meant to provide a vital line of defense against aerial threats and could, in theory, engage enemy aircraft at ranges up to 4,000 meters. Yet everyone inside the flotilla recognized that beyond 2,000 meters, the practical accuracy of such weapons plummeted, making distant engagements far less reliable. The development of German naval anti-aircraft defenses had historically been reactive rather than proactive. Initially, submarines relied heavily on diving quickly when aircraft were spotted, a tactic that proved effective in 1940 and 41, when Allied reconnaissance planes were limited in number and plagued by poor detection equipment. However, this comfort had begun to fade with the advent of centimeter-wave radar that German detection systems could not perceive, and with the deployment of Lee lights, night illumination systems that revealed submarines' positions in the darkness. These technological improvements decisively shifted the balance in favor of the Allied air forces, forcing German submarines to stay on the surface more often and engage in increasingly perilous firefights with attacking aircraft. In response, the German Navy launched the U-Flak experiment, an effort spearheaded by Admiral Donat. His aim was to transform conventional boats, such as U-441. The evaluation of military engagements during this period often painted a picture fraught with disappointment and strategic reassessment. For instance, there was considerable skepticism surrounding attempts to accurately quantify the damage inflicted by aerial assaults. Reports claimed that despite intense bombardments, only 2 enemy aircraft had been definitively destroyed in a particular confrontation, an outcome seen as underwhelming. This claim was made even as Allied aircraft suffered significant casualties, a consequence, some believed, of the increasingly sophisticated tactics employed by the enemy, which included adopting novel combat strategies that proved highly effective against traditional formations. In this evolving landscape, Allied pilots experimented with tactics meant to minimize harm while maximizing their offensive potential. These new tactics involved aircraft flying at strategic distances in persistent circles, maintaining a cautious outer perimeter, while simultaneously calling in reinforcements from other aircraft units. Once assembled, these formations would execute coordinated attacks, unleashing their combined firepower in a concentrated burst that effectively overwhelmed the enemy's defensive anti-aircraft fire. Such tactics were designed to counter the formidable defenses and increase the likelihood of destroying or damaging enemy aircraft safely. within the confines of a naval vessel designated U-256. During its transformation into the ULAC configuration, Lieutenant Wolfgang Mueller, serving as the ship's gunnery officer, kept a detailed correspondence with his wife. In his letters, he vividly described the formidable firepower generated by the ship's quadruple 20mm autocannon mount. When all four barrels fired together, the weapons system could discharge up to 800 rounds of ammunition every minute, creating a continuous stream of tracers. This barrage was so dense that the tracers appeared as a solid rope of fiery light extending toward oncoming aircraft, a visual spectacle that underscored the raw destructive power wielded from the ship's deck. However, Mueller also acknowledged the inherent limitation tied to the ammunition supply. Each magazine held only 20 rounds for each gun. This meant that during sustained engagements, reloading became necessary at regular intervals, inevitably creating vulnerable gaps in the ship's protective fire. Such moments, windows when the enemy could exploit poorly covered sectors, were exploited skillfully by experienced Allied pilots, who learned to identify an attack during these lulls when the ship's defenses temporarily dimmed. The battle of technological innovation versus tactical adaptation was ongoing, with each side continually seeking advantage. Meanwhile, across Europe, British scientists and military strategists were developing cutting-edge solutions to address the persistent threat of enemy submarines, notably those participating in the U-boat campaign. The Telecommunications Research Establishment worked diligently on new radar systems capable of detecting periscopes at distances of up to 5 miles, an advancement that significantly increased early submarine detection. These innovations offered a potential edge in the battle beneath the waves, allowing Allied vessels to respond more swiftly and accurately to submerged threats. Concurrent with these efforts, weapons designers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment were experimenting with a variety of anti-submarine and anti-ship armament configurations. Among such innovations, they explored the feasibility of highball bouncing bombs and various kinds of guided missile systems aimed at improving range and hit accuracy. Despite these advanced developments, the most straightforward and practical solution emerged in the form of mounting large-caliber guns on aircraft, a tactic that proved effective given the circumstances. This approach gained particular favor after Mullen's company successfully demonstrated their new automatic loading mechanism, which could reliably feed heavy shells, specifically 57mm rounds, into the gun without jamming, even during the chaos of combat. Wing Commander Peter Wim Barnes, serving as Deputy Director of Operational Requirements at the Air Ministry, became an advocate for the so-called Mosquito Project, a campaign to deploy aircraft equipped with these powerful guns, despite initial resistance from some officers. Skeptics argued that rockets, which had shown promise in anti-shipping roles, were sufficient. Thus, conventional cannons were undervalued. Barnes, in a memorandum written in June of 1943, pointed out that extensive tests proved the 57mm guns achieved a significantly higher hit rate against tank-sized targets, about one-third of all shots, compared with a mere 5% success rate for rockets. He acknowledged that rockets possessed a distinct advantage in versatility, as they could be mounted onto various fighter bombers without extensive modifications. Nonetheless, the manufacturing process at Mullen's factory in Peterborough required a notable re-engineering effort. This factory, traditionally involved in producing cigarette machinery, known for manufacturing intricate machinery designed to handle tobacco leaves and paper, had to adapt its production lines to produce autoloaders capable of reliably cycling 2-pound brass cartridges in 6-pound shells. This novel automatic feeding mechanism employed a 5-tray system, akin to their cigarette packaging equipment, though reinforced with heavy sheet steel and powered by hydraulic rams that could withstand the intense G-forces encountered during aggressive maneuvers. The design's robustness was crucial for maintaining reliable operation under combat conditions. Meanwhile, amid intelligence-gathering efforts, German agents in Portugal provided fragments of information concerning British experiments involving heavy aircraft weaponry, effectively hinting at unconventional and formidable. In the days leading up to the daring mission, reports had been circulating about the possibility of using innovative aircraft tactics that could potentially threaten enemy shipping. However, these claims were swiftly dismissed by the Naval High Command, which regarded such reports as little more than propaganda. The staff officers, firmly convinced of their own conventional wisdom, argued vehemently that deploying a small, single-shot weapon, presumably mounted on aircraft, would be ineffective, primarily because they believed that the recoil generated by such a weapon would be so intense that it would completely destroy any wooden aircraft attempting to carry it. This assumption persisted despite the fact that the Havilland engineers had already devised a solution to mitigate recoil issues. A sophisticated hydraulic buffer system paired with reinforced structural elements designed specifically to absorb and distribute recoil forces efficiently. It seemed, however, that their groundbreaking engineering had gone unnoticed or unconsidered within the higher echelons. When the morning of March 27 arrived, the weather conditions proved to be ideal for the anticipated anti-shipping operation. A thick cloud cover enveloped the area at around 3,000 feet, which served as an excellent concealment for the approaching aircraft, often referred to as mosquitoes due to their light frame and swift agility. Thanks to tiny gaps in the overcast, the pilots and navigators aboard the Mosquitoes were able to acquire visual contact with their target from their vantage point at high altitude, providing an opportunity to strike with precision while remaining hidden until the crucial moment. Leading the formation was Squadron Leader Phillips, commanding Mosquito 18, bearing the registration NT-225. His navigator and flight officer, Thompson, diligently cross-checked their current position against the anticipated track of the German submarine U-960, relying on intelligence data received from high-level signals interception. Neither Phillips nor Thompson was aware that their navigational information was derived from ultra-intercepts, top-secret communications decoding German naval signals that precisely detailed the submarine's planned route and the exact timing of its passage through the designated area. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, within the operations room of the 19 Group headquarters situated in Plymouth, Air Vice Marshal Brian Baker carefully monitored the unfolding situation. His reports arrived via wireless, updating him on the current positions of the strike force as gathered from official reports transmitted by the aircraft. Baker, cognizant of the stakes involved, understood that this mission would serve as a vital test case for evaluating the practicality of the new SETC concept, an innovative approach aimed at engaging and destroying heavily guarded convoy targets. Previous efforts had been directed at single submarines, producing encouraging results but lacking the robustness needed to contend with densely defended convoys comprising multiple vessels equipped with anti-aircraft defenses, especially the specially designed flak ships that had recently been incorporated into German convoy escorts. One particularly thorny challenge was posed by the remaining spare beer vessels. These ships were heavily modified merchant vessels, reinforced with concrete armor and heavily armed, mounting as many as 8 20mm guns alongside larger 74mm weapons. Commanded by seasoned Marine officers from the CRES, short for Combined Royal and Escort Service, these vessels had been trained to coordinate their defensive firepower meticulously. Their strategy entailed creating overlapping patterns of flak fire that could threaten aircraft approaching from any direction, in essence forming a protective shield around the convoy. The crews were thoroughly trained to maintain steady, relentless fire even when under attack, unlike ordinary merchant sailors who tended to panic when faced with the flurry of enemy aircraft diving from above. One prominent figure among these officers was Captain Zur C. Robert Giese, who had commanded these heavily fortified vessels since 1942. He had developed comprehensive standard operating procedures designed to maximize anti-aircraft coverage, stationing his ships strategically to cover all possible approaches to the convoy. His gunners had explicit instructions to engage any aircraft coming within 4,000 meters, regardless of whether the aircraft displayed hostile intent, believing that in the hostile waters near the Bay of Biscay, any British aircraft was a potential threat that needed to be neutralized swiftly. This aggressive stance had occasionally led to complications, with German aircraft sometimes being mistakenly targeted and even fired upon by their own forces due to this policy of proactive engagement. The mathematics involved in anti-aircraft gunnery was unforgiving. Gunners needed to calculate the speed and direction of an incoming aircraft with exceptional precision, often under severe conditions that made such estimations difficult. They had to project where the aircraft would be at the exact moment their shells would arrive, rather than aiming directly at the aircraft's current location, a practice known as leading the target. And this was especially challenging as the vessel rocked and pitched in the Atlantic swell. The more extended the range, the more complex these calculations became, and the lower the probability of a successful hit, as these compounded errors exponentially decrease the chances of connecting with their rapidly moving target. From a distance of perhaps 1,000 meters, the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire decreased markedly, dropping from around 10% to less than 1% at 3,000 meters altitude, even when advanced and precise ranging equipment was employed to assist in targeting and firing solutions. Sergeant Giovanni Martinelli, a skilled naval gunner hailing from Italy and later serving under the German flag after Italy's capitulation, vividly recalled the constant frustration he faced during combat. He manned a 37-millimeter gun aboard a spare vessel, striving to engage British aircraft that seemingly floated just beyond the reach of their effective gunfire range. Despite their best efforts to engage these aircraft, his crew found themselves repeatedly thwarted as their targets maintained a cautious distance, evading precise hits. It appeared that the crews of both sides possessed an intimate knowledge of the critical range at which flak, fragmentation anti-aircraft artillery, would cease to be effective. Long and drawn-out exchanges of fire ensued, each side expending thousands of rounds without either managing to score a decisive hit. These protracted battles of attrition drained the ammunition supplies of both parties and exhausted the gun crews, the relentless firing often ending without tangible results, as aircraft repeatedly evaded or outmaneuvered their opponents. These encounters became emblematic of a larger struggle involving attritional tactics, where massive quantities of ammunition were burned through in vain, and neither side could claim victory despite the costly expenditure. In Berlin, Rear Admiral Kojima Hideo, the naval attaché accompanying the Japanese Navy, meticulously observed German anti-aircraft training exercises. In his confidential reports to Tokyo, he acknowledged the qualities of the weapons, especially praising the excellence of the 37-millimeter Flak 36, which boasted a high rate of fire and an effective ceiling reaching 4,200 meters. Nevertheless, he also noted that the human element, namely the gunners, remained a significant challenge. Developing the precise, instinctive lead calculations necessary for effective firing demanded months of rigorous training. As the war progressed and casualties increased, these gunners were often pulled away from training units to fill in for combat losses, which further hampered their skill development. This situation emphasized how essential experienced instructors and continuous practice were, yet almost impossible to sustain amid the demands of wartime. Meanwhile, aboard the bridges of various vessels, officers like Steinberg kept a vigilant watch. As the convoy approached La Pallas, Steinberg scanned the horizon through his binoculars, noting the familiar silhouette of vast concrete naval pens in the distance. Their roofs bristled with anti-aircraft positions ready to add firepower to any defensive effort. Yet despite the apparent readiness, a sense of unease crept into Steinberg's mind. Reports from other boats hinted at unusual behavior by British aircraft, maintaining a cautious distance rather than launching aggressive attacks. They seemed to be testing something or trying out new tactics that the crewing Marine units had yet to encounter, leaving Steinberg with a foreboding feeling that the enemy's strategies were evolving. An aircraft embodiment of innovative design, the Mosquito had been a remarkable development in wartime aviation technology. Originally conceived as an unarmed attack aircraft, its primary advantage was reliance on incredible speed and altitude to evade enemy defenses, rather than heavy defensive armament. Designed mainly of wood at a time when many nations were shifting to all-metal construction, the Mosquito's unorthodox materials and design concept challenged conventional aircraft engineering standards. Despite its unusual look, this aircraft proved to be one of the most versatile of the war, adaptable to a multitude of roles: fighter, bomber, reconnaissance platform, and, intriguingly, as a mounted anti-tank gun. Powered by Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the Mosquito could reach a top speed of over 400 miles per hour, astonishing for its time. Jeffrey de Havilland Jr., the son of the company's founder and a seasoned chief test pilot, played a crucial role in demonstrating and proving the aircraft's extraordinary capabilities. His rigorous testing and flying revealed that the wooden construction, initially chosen to save weight, actually had several serious advantages. It was surprisingly resilient and capable of absorbing battle damage that would typically cripple or destroy a metal-skinned aircraft. Additionally, the smoothness of the plywood skin reduced aerodynamic drag compared to riveted aluminum, contributing significantly to the aircraft's exceptional speed and maneuverability. De Havilland Jr. could never have anticipated that his father's pioneering design would eventually see service modified to carry a weapon originally intended to combat tanks, an innovative adaptation of this versatile aircraft. As the morning sun ascended higher in the sky, its rays piercing through patches of cloud cover, the aircraft and its crews awaited the next phase of operations. The promise of daylight, often heralded as the ideal time for attack, carried the renewed hope of a decisive step in the ongoing battles. Little did they know that this unassuming wooden aircraft would become a symbol of adaptability and ingenuity, capable of fulfilling roles far beyond its initial conception in the evolving theater of war. Under the ominous gray skies, conditions that might have usually favored the defenders by illuminating the ocean's surface in a shimmering silver hue, instead turned into a double-edged sword. Typically, such reflective conditions would silhouette attacking aircraft, making them easier targets for the anti-aircraft guns stationed on the vessels. However, the squadron leader, Phillips, had exercised tactical forethought and carefully positioned his formation to approach from the east. This approach kept the blazing sun directly behind them, a calculated move designed to reduce visibility for the enemy, but still expose the convoy to their full force of attack once they descended towards it. As they began their descent from an altitude of 5,000 feet, the squadron slowed their speed deliberately, maintaining a steady, controlled approach that would give Phillips' navigator enough time to precisely align the gun sight on the leading spare bomber, primed and ready. The German convoy's formation demonstrated the tired but adaptable strategy that had been refined through over 2 years of brutal engagement in the Bay of Biscay. Lessons learned from countless battles had shaped this tactical array, with the assembly of vessels arranged so that the minesweepers, equipped with overlapping fields of fire, provided mutual coverage while avoiding risks of multiple vessels being struck by a single bomb or torpedo. The spare bomber ships, positioned at the forefront, acted as a buffer to absorb any misfired mines, ensuring the more valuable and vulnerable units behind them remained protected. These lead vessels, heavily armed, could unleash concentrated fire on attacking aircraft attempting frontal assaults, their steel wings and gun ports blazing. Meanwhile, U-960 was tucked securely within the formation's core, prepared to dive and crash through the water to evade if the escort screen was breached, knowing full well that shallow coastal waters posed significant dangers, particularly with British aircraft potentially surveilling and marking his location for destroyers to hunt him down. In the midst of this tense ballet of war, Flight Officer Turner, commanding the 2nd Section, and aboard the Mosquito MM-425, observed as Phillips' aircraft commenced its attack run with meticulous precision. From Turner's vantage point, he watched anxiously as a rising curtain of tracer rounds spewed from the German convoy. Every anti-aircraft gun capable of firing opened up in a chaotic symphony of gunfire, with 20-millimeter shells screaming through the air, only to self-destruct in distant puffs of black smoke at roughly 2,000 meters. Meanwhile, the larger 37-millimeter rounds streaked past their tracers, continuing further into the sky before burning out at around 3,000 meters, their invisible potential lethal energy hidden from view, yet deadly enough to cause catastrophic damage if they managed to strike an aircraft. The accuracy of the German 25-millimeter Mullins gun had taken everyone by surprise during recent trials. Pilots discovered that once they compensated for the slight downward recoil caused by the gun's slight pitch, they could reliably hit targets the size of a tank at distances of up to 1,500 yards. The gun's hydraulic buffer absorbed much of the recoil, preventing excessive shock to the aircraft's structure while still producing a formidable force enough to influence the aircraft's trim during firing. During practice and combat, pilots had to apply steady pressure on the control column to maintain a stable sight picture if they wanted to hit their target accurately. Across the Atlantic, in Berlin's high command centers, Gross Admiral Karl Donat scrutinized the latest reports of losses from the Bay of Biscay with increasing concern. Despite the implementation of sophisticated convoy tactics and the bolstering of anti-aircraft defenses aboard their vessels, Casualties among the U-boat ships had stubbornly refused to decline. This anomaly led Donut to entertain the unsettling thought that British forces might have developed new weapons or tactics that rendered German defensive measures less effective than before. His staff reassured him confidently that the sheer concentration of firepower from multiple vessels should, in theory, make close-range attacks too costly for British aircraft. The Italian Mediterranean campaign had revealed similar patterns. Ammiraglio Raphael Dorton, reporting to the Italian Supermarina, warned that British aircraft appeared capable of inflicting damage on vessels without needing to close into the range that German defenses considered optimum for an attack. Night operations in particular underscored this issue. British planes demonstrated an ability to damage ships from stealthy distances, often striking without warning and retreating before extensive counterfire could be brought to bear. The pattern posed a pressing challenge for the proud German Naval Command, forcing them to continuously adapt and question whether their existing tactics and weapons remained fully effective against an increasingly unpredictable and resourceful enemy. The warship found itself struggling to keep pace with the rapidly maneuvering enemy fighters, its crew members acutely aware of the swift, unpredictable movements of their foes. However, the Captain Clark attributed their difficulties primarily to advancements in torpedo technology that had made the Japanese submarines more formidable and elusive. He failed to consider the more subtle, yet equally dangerous threat posed by aerial gunnery, an oversight that would later prove costly to the Italian fleet and its strategic position. In the final months leading up to Italy's surrender, several vessels had suffered damage or destruction as a result of underestimating this aerial component. Japanese naval doctrine had always prioritized avoiding direct surface confrontation with aircraft, especially during the battles for control of the seas. Ships like these G-29 were designed with a specific tactic in mind: to plunge beneath the waves swiftly, typically within 30 seconds if threatened, rather than engaging in protracted surface combat that would render them vulnerable. Such a strategy proved effective to an extent, but the long, arduous transit through the Bay of Biscay, en route to German-speaking ports, made it increasingly evident that this tactic was no longer viable without adequate support. Accordingly, Japanese commanders were compelled to rely more heavily on their German surface escort ships, although they privately harbored doubts about the real effectiveness of these collaborations. This skepticism grew when reports from Tokyo began to surface, revealing a rising tide of casualties and losses among the convoy escorts, despite the mounting deployment of heavier anti-aircraft artillery on ships like the U-boat and other coordinated vessels. It became painfully clear that the combined firepower was not sufficient to deter or destroy the attacking aircraft effectively. Meanwhile, the combat escalated on the water's surface as a deadly shell from Phillips's Autumn-designed 57mm autocannon struck the lead vessel, which was a modified merchant ship, positioned just above the waterline. The armor-piercing projectile sliced through the vessel's hull plating, engineered to withstand some damage before detonating inside an ammunition storage hold. The explosion fueled a towering column of smoke and fiery debris that burst through ventilation shafts and hatches. As secondary detonations rippled through the interior compartments, chaos ensued among the crew members desperately working to contain the fires, knowing that their vessel's survival depended on their rapid and coordinated efforts. Despite the intense damage, the German gun crews maintained their relentless barrage, pouring fire on the attacking aircraft even as damage control teams scrambled to suppress spreading flames. The crew members fought instinctively, their training pushing them to keep firing and to stay at their posts rather than seek immediate cover amid the chaos. From his vantage point, Steinberg watched in astonishment and disbelief as the British aircraft continued its attack run from well beyond the effective range of their anti-aircraft guns. These planes fired precise, measured shots that struck with deadly accuracy, each impact punctuated by the distinctive crack of shells, heavy caliber rounds penetrating steel armor with relentless precision. This was a different sound from the bomb and depth charge attacks he had previously experienced, where explosive devices were the primary danger. The introduction of these aircraft-mounted cannons was transforming the very nature of such naval engagements, enabling the attackers to linger beyond the reach of the strongest defenses, all while delivering lethal strikes. The calculations behind the weaponry and tactics became stark and unforgiving. Captain Muller's 57mm Mullins gun could accurately engage targets at a staggering distance of over 18,000 yards, well beyond the effective range of German 20 mm anti-aircraft guns, which were generally useless past 2,000 meters. This created a lethal kill zone where the attacking Mosquito planes could operate with relative impunity, their lightweight wooden construction making them difficult to track with optical rangefinders, and especially considering their high speed and sudden maneuvers. Their rapid, complex deflection calculations and high-speed capabilities made them a nightmare for traditional anti-aircraft defenses, giving them a decisive advantage in both positioning and firepower over the convoy's defenders. Within this chaos, Oberleutnant Friedrich Weber, commanding one of the M-class minesweepers, ordered his 37 mm gun crew to engage the attacking aircraft despite the extreme distance. His hope was that the larger caliber weapon might intimidate the Mosquito planes, or at least force them to break off their attack to seek more vulnerable targets. However, the British pilots, seasoned and acutely aware of the limits of their opponent's weapons, appeared to understand perfectly where the boundaries of effective fire lay. Maintaining their lethal distance, they continued their meticulous, calculated attack pattern, releasing shells into the convoy with precision rather than reckless, indiscriminate firing. This behavior suggested that the pilots were intentionally conserving ammunition and maintaining discipline, mindful that overzealous firing could reveal their position or waste valuable resources. The second phase of the attack was targeting the submarine designated 3669 itself. Flight Officer Turner carefully lined up his sights on the conning tower of the submerged vessel, preparing for a precise strike aimed at crippling or destroying the submarine's command and control facilities. Every movement in regions where the concentration of anti-aircraft defenses reached its peak, the threat to attacking aircraft and vessels grew exponentially. On one such occasion, a decisive shell struck the vital structure of a strategically positioned bridge, sending deadly fragments hurtling through the ranks of the gun crews stationed there. Steinberg, vividly feeling the tremor beneath his feet, observed how a projectile 57 millimeters in diameter tore through the outer hull of the submarine, rupturing fuel bunkers with a violent force that caused streams of diesel oil to cascade into the vessel's wake. Despite the efforts of escort vessels to deploy a thick blanket of smoke to conceal the submarine's position from the attacking aircraft, the Mosquito's superior altitude and agility granted it an almost clairvoyant vantage point. This aerial advantage enabled the pilots to spot and exploit even the smallest gaps in the artificial fog curtain, maintaining a deadly accuracy. Honing their aim based on the most recent movements and positions of targets, the pilots continued to unleash a relentless barrage of 57 millimeter shells, each one consistently striking its intended mark with alarming regularity. The impact of each explosion gradually eroded the convoy's defensive cohesion, destroying gun emplacements and igniting ammunition storages that detonated with deafening explosions. The scenes of destruction compounded as the attack persisted, exposing the vulnerability of the convoy's defenses. Squadron leader Phillips launched a second aggressive sortie, this time targeting a minesweeper that had moved forward to shield the vessel designated as 960. His remaining shells found their mark again, crushing the vessel's bridge and flooding its engine room, which significantly reduced its speed and caused it to fall one step out of formation. Flames poured out from the ventilation grates, engulfing the interior of the ship and forcing its crew to abandon their gun positions and assist in battling the fierce blaze. These necessary evacuations and firefighting efforts created a widening gap in the convoy's defensive screen, which the swift and well-coordinated attacks of the conventional Mosquito fighter bombers immediately capitalized on. This barrage of attacks had a profound psychological impact on the German crews manning the defenses. Gunners quickly recognized that their anti-aircraft weapons, regardless of their caliber, could no longer effectively challenge the attacking aircraft. An overwhelming sense of helplessness took hold among the defenders, eroding morale in a way that conventional bombing runs could not match. Unlike typical aerial assaults, where the defenders felt at least some agency in fighting back, the unrelenting aerial assaults from the Mosquitoes created an atmosphere of utter vulnerability and despair. The emergence of this new threat compelled military strategists to fundamentally rethink their convoy protection tactics, which only months earlier had been deemed adequate. In the wake of the attack on the convoy, after vessels like 960 limped into the harbor of La Pallas battered and damaged, with hundreds of casualties, Steinberg's after-action report underscored the near impossibility of defending against aircraft that could operate from beyond the effective range of traditional anti-aircraft artillery. He proposed a vital shift in strategy. Future convoys must be accompanied throughout their entire journey by fighter escort aircraft, rather than relying solely on defensive guns mounted on ships. This conclusion highlighted how thoroughly the Mosquito tactics had disrupted the long-standing German defensive doctrine. Initially, the Technical Intelligence Section at Marine Headquarters refused to accept the possibility that the British could have successfully fitted a 57 mm gun onto an aircraft. Skeptics doubted, based on structural physics, whether recoil forces from such a powerful weapon could be withstood by the wooden frames of their aircraft, arguing that the recoil would exceed the limits of aircraft construction. However, the recovered shell fragments and testimonies from multiple eyewitnesses eventually compelled officials to acknowledge the startling reality. The aircraft-mounted 57 mm gun was indeed operational. The recognition of this technological advancement prompted urgent requests for longer-range anti-aircraft weaponry capable of engaging the Mosquito fighters before they could reach firing positions. Scrambling to adapt to this new form of aerial assault, German forces began exploring ways to extend their defensive reach and effectiveness. Throughout the spring of 1944, Wing Commander Tony Phillips continued to fly and lead missions involving the Mosquito Tetsi aircraft. His aerial combat record expanded further when, in May, he played a key role in the attack against the Japanese submarine Rs-29. During this encounter, Phillips's crew successfully utilized 4 shells to disable a Junkers J-88 fighter, demonstrating the evolving capabilities of the innovative aircraft and the increased threat level posed by these highly adaptable units. In a striking demonstration of its destructive capability, a single projectile managed to completely sever the engine from an aircraft, vividly showcasing the devastating power of the 57 mm guns, not only against ships, but also against flying targets. Although this feat was certainly impressive, it was considered a fortunate bonus rather than the primary intent behind the weapon's design and deployment. The Mullins Company, instrumental in advancing this technology, garnered significant recognition for their contributory role to the wartime effort. Their innovative adaptation of machinery originally intended for cigarette manufacturing proved to be remarkably versatile when repurposed for military applications. In acknowledgement of their inventive efforts, Desmond Mullins was awarded the United States Medal of Freedom, a distinguished honor bestowed for groundbreaking technological developments that aid national defense. Following the conclusion of hostilities, the Mullins Company seamlessly transitioned back into civilian manufacturing, resuming their previous production lines. However, their experimental foray into weapon development, particularly the military applications of the technology known as the Mosquito Tetsi, remained shrouded in secrecy for years, owing to the sensitivity of the classified information. During this period, the true capabilities of the Tetsi remained hidden from the public eye, serving as a clandestine edge in wartime strategy. In response to the emerging threat posed by the Tetsi weapons, German military engineers expedited the development of their own cutting-edge anti-aircraft systems. These efforts included pioneering explorations into guided missile technology and designing shells equipped with proximity fuses, enabling their artillery to engage aircraft at increasingly extended ranges with greater accuracy. Despite these advancements, the Germans' efforts arrived too late to alter the course of the Battle of the Atlantic significantly, as Allied forces continued to suffer substantial losses due to the fragmentation of their naval and air defenses. Throughout 2044, losses aboard ships and submarines persisted, as Allied aircraft leveraged their technological superiority to wreak havoc on German supply lines and communication routes. Meanwhile, Italian naval officials studied German after-action reports with growing concern. They observed that their own anti-aircraft defenses were markedly inferior when faced with the German standoff attack tactics. Most Italian vessels were armed with 20 mm Breda guns, which possessed shorter effective ranges and less destructive power compared to their German counterparts, thus rendering them less capable of engaging sustained or distant aerial assaults. Frustrated by these shortcomings, Italian military authorities made urgent efforts to acquire and field German 17 and 25 mm guns, hoping these would enhance their defenses against the increasingly sophisticated aerial threats. However, these initiatives were abruptly halted when Italy surrendered in September of the year 1943, halting further efforts to equip their fleet with advanced anti-aircraft artillery. Looking eastward, Japan's submarine fleet, preparing for patrol missions into European waters, incorporated lessons learned from I-29's encounter with the Mosquito Tetsu. Their modifications included adding extra anti-aircraft weaponry and training their gunners rigorously to target aircraft at maximum possible ranges, regardless of the rapid depletion or scarcity of their ammunition. Despite these adjustments, the approach proved unsuccessful when aboard submarine No. 52, which was intercepted and sunk by conventional Allied aircraft in June of the year 1944. The submarine's reinforced defensive measures failed to prevent its destruction, signifying a tactical failure despite the enhancements. Throughout the year 1944, production of the Mosquito Tetsu aircraft persisted, with approximately 27 units completed before the project was ultimately discontinued. The shift was driven by strategic reassessment, favoring the deployment of rocket-equipped fighter bombers that, while sacrificing some precision, offered greater operational versatility. These newer aircraft could engage multiple types of targets with minimal modifications, thus more effectively meeting the demands of an evolving wartime battlefield, especially given the diminishing threat posed by the U-boat. Veterans of the 848th Squadron often argued that no other weapon system could match the Mosquito Tetsu's remarkable ability to destroy fortified targets from a safe distance. Moreover, its psychological impact extended well beyond its direct combat effectiveness. The presence of such weaponry instilled fear and hesitation among German submarine crews, who grew increasingly reluctant to emerge from their submerged positions even when operating in heavily defended convoys. Knowing that British aircraft possessed potent weapons capable of penetrating their vessels' pressure hulls from afar, rendering return fire impossible, exacerbated this trepidation. This pervasive fear contributed to a near-virtual abandonment of surface maneuvers by German submarines when confronted by the Allies' advanced air power, highlighting the profound psychological and tactical influence of the Mosquito Tetsu and similar systems during the crucial late years of the conflict. By late 1944, the strategic deployment of the U-boat operations shifted significantly within the Bay of Biscay, marking a crucial chapter in aerial and naval warfare during that period. The comprehensive technical examination of the Mullins gun system uncovered a myriad of innovative solutions that distinguished it from standard armaments. These advances addressed challenges that had long confounded traditional weapon engineers, chiefly through an automatic loading mechanism meticulously designed with principles borrowed from cutting-edge high-speed packaging technology. This inventive approach enabled the weapon to maintain a steady, reliable feed of ammunition even under the intense, violent maneuvers characteristic of aerial combat, where rapid directional shifts and high G turns were routine. One of the pivotal features was the 5-tray magazine system, which allowed the weapon to sustain a high rate of fire across extended periods without frequent reloading pauses. Such an arrangement was especially valuable in the continuous engagement scenarios typical of mid-20th century air warfare, where stopping to reload could mean the difference between victory and destruction. The evolution of German anti-aircraft strategies in response to the threat posed by these aggressive aerial units took on a desperation-driven character. To counter the fast-moving aircraft, German forces mounted heavy Army 88mm flak guns on specially reinforced ships, attempting to turn their coastal defenses into formidable barriers. However, these anti-aircraft guns proved to be insufficient in terms of traverse speed, which limited their ability to track the highly agile aircraft effectively during high-speed pursuits. Despite this, their value was not solely in combat efficiency, but also in psychological warfare, serving as a tangible sign that the enemy was willing to deploy substantial resources to defend strategic assets. The crews manning these defenses gained a semblance of confidence, believing they could at least initiate some form of engagement, even if their chance of hitting targets at great distances remained minimal. In response to these threats, British pilots operating conventional Mosquito aircraft alongside the specialized Tetsu variants developed well-coordinated tactics to harness the strengths of both platforms. While the 57mm heavily armed aircraft methodically suppressed anti-aircraft positions from a distance, Their standard fighter-bomber counterparts closed in to deliver rockets and cannon fire against vessels whose defenses had been critically weakened through prior assaults. This integrated joint force approach, orchestral in its execution, proved profoundly effective against even the most heavily defended convoys, ensuring that combined arms tactics could turn seemingly insurmountable defenses into vulnerable targets. The military infrastructure supporting these operations featured specialized maintenance facilities strategically located at coastal command bases. These sites were equipped to service the complex mechanisms of the Mullen guns, staffed by teams of technicians proficient in both aircraft systems and artillery maintenance, an extraordinary cross-disciplinary expertise rare in wartime. Such technicians specialized in maintaining and troubleshooting a fusion of technologies that had never before been integrated in military equipment, representing a truly pioneering development in wartime engineering. Attempting to develop effective countermeasures, German engineers experimented with radar-guided flak systems designed to engage aircraft at longer ranges. Yet, the wooden construction of the Mosquito aircraft created a poor radar return, hampering detection efforts. Adding to the difficulty, the aircraft's high speeds severely complicated radar tracking, rendering existing German fire control systems increasingly ineffective against this new threat. The high velocity of the Mosquito aircraft, combined with their stealthy radar signature, meant that German defenses could rarely achieve the necessary precision for effective interception, further tilting the tactical balance. The repercussions of this technological and tactical shift extended deeply into submarine operations, which suffered far beyond immediate losses. Submarines were forced to remain submerged for longer durations than optimal, traveling extensive distances under the sea to avoid aerial attacks, inevitably prolonging transit times and diminishing operational readiness. The continued need to allocate treasured destroyers and minesweepers for heavy surface escort duties, in an effort to protect these vulnerable submarines and convoys, created a cascade of strategic and resource allocation challenges. Such demands diverted critical assets from other vital missions, thereby impacting the overall naval force structure and operational versatility. Post-war analyses conducted by the United States Navy's Operational Research Group concluded that the Mosquito Tetsi represented an optimal solution to a particular tactical dilemma. It provided a notable standoff engagement ability against fortified maritime targets, such as heavily defended ships and submarines, without relying on the more complex, costly, and logistically demanding guided missile systems. This combat approach, born out of necessity and technological ingenuity, illustrated how a well-designed aircraft could fill an essential niche in maritime warfare without the encumbrances associated with more sophisticated weaponry. Such innovations in tactical doctrines shaped the future of maritime combat strategies, emphasizing agility, coordination, and technological adaptability to overcome formidable adversaries. The development and deployment of the Tetsi weapon system marked a significant, if complex, chapter in military aviation history, reflecting a relentless pursuit of innovative solutions to enhance attack capabilities against enemy ships. Although these modified aircraft prioritize operational flexibility over pinpoint accuracy, their impact on enemy naval forces was nonetheless substantial. The use of heavy 57mm artillery shells penetrated the hulls of German vessels with devastating effect, inflicting heavy casualties and damage. For the German sailors who survived such encounters, the psychological scars proved as enduring as the physical wounds, fostering a climate of dread and helplessness. Survivors recounted a harrowing experience of being under relentless fire from weaponry that was, at least at the time, difficult to counter effectively, a psychological burden that lingered long after their ships had withdrawn into the safety of fortified ports, seeking refuge from the relentless assault. Data collected from squadron records, notably from the 248th Squadron, shed light on the extensive training required to operate these specialized aircraft efficiently. Pilots needed significant preparation to master the unique flying dynamics introduced by these modifications. The off-center placement of the gun installations resulted in asymmetric thrust, making standard handling procedures, such as engine-out protocols, notably more complicated than during typical operations. Additionally, the recoil generated by firing the weapon system affected the aircraft's trim balance, necessitating constant adjustments to maintain stable flight during firing sequences. Developing the necessary targeting finesse and control over these unconventional handling challenges required a training period stretching over several weeks, even for pilots already experienced with the Mosquito aircraft. Such rigorous preparation underscored the complexity of integrating these weapons into active combat routines. The strategic significance of the Tetsy's success reached beyond immediate battlefield effect. It exerted influence over Allied military planning, especially concerning operations in the Pacific theater. There were considerations to deploy similarly equipped aircraft to disrupt Japanese shipping routes, further complicating enemy logistics and supply lines. However, the rapid conclusion of the war following Japan's surrender meant that many of these plans remained unrealized. As a result, the Mosquito Tetsy became a unique fixture in the European theater, representing an experimental phase in aircraft armament that never achieved widespread adoption or production on a broader scale. Its full potential remained tantalizingly out of reach, evaporating with the onset of peace and the geopolitical shifts that followed. Maintenance of these specialized aircraft presented notable challenges, primarily due to the excessive barrel wear caused by the intense firing of high-velocity 57 mm rounds. The guns, designed to deliver concentrated firepower, required regular replacement after firing approximately 200 rounds, a relatively small ammunition load. This limitation constrained sustained operations, forcing crews to manage ammunition meticulously throughout missions. Pilots learned to conserve their limited shell inventory, prioritizing high-value targets over mere opportunistic shots. This delicate balancing act of ammunition management became a vital skill, emphasizing precision and strategic targeting to maximize operational effectiveness. The intelligence gleaned from captured German documents provided valuable insights into the perceived threat posed by the Tetzy. Translated German reports revealed an almost palpable concern among the enemy's command structures, especially among the U-boat, German naval defense units, regarding their inability to effectively counter this new damaging weapon. German commanders feared that enemy propaganda, amplifying the successes of Tetzy operations, could potentially erode German morale further by exposing vulnerabilities and highlighting the limitations of their naval defenses. Such psychological warfare tactics aimed to demoralize and disorient projectiles of confidence across German military ranks, contributing to a broader strategic initiative aimed at undermining the opponent's resolve. Environmental factors also played a crucial role in shaping the operational history of the Tetzy aircraft. Particularly infamous was the Bay of Bisque, known for its capricious weather conditions, where a frequent combination of fog and storms severely curtailed flying days and limited operational windows. Additionally, rough seas complicated the precise calculations needed to aim the heavy artillery accurately at maneuvering ship targets. Pilots had to develop the skill of adjusting their targeting systems to compensate for ship motion, often requiring extensive hands-on experience during actual combat conditions where mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. Mastery of these environmental challenges placed a premium on rigorous practice, often involving flying in adverse weather or simulated conditions to prepare pilots for the unpredictable nature of maritime warfare. The legacy of the Mosquito Tetzy reached beyond its immediate wartime service, notably influencing post-war aircraft armament strategies. Several nations experimented with large-caliber aircraft guns, inspired by the weapon's perceived potential for anti-shipping roles. Although guided missiles eventually emerged as the preferred technology for remote, standoff engagement, rendering large unguided gun systems largely obsolete, the concept of flying artillery retained a degree of interest for specialized ground attack applications. The design lessons learned from the Tetzy program contributed to the evolution of aerial weaponry, emphasizing precision, firing stability, and the importance of tailoring aircraft modifications to specific operational needs. Finally, studies conducted by German naval architects analyzing the effects of 57 mm shells against submarine hulls revealed that these vessels, at least in theory, during the period leading up to and throughout the final phases of the conflict, the development of specialized aerial weapon systems drew significant attention from military strategists. Among these innovations, certain designs aimed to enhance armor protection, trying to balance increased resilience with structural weight. However, despite serious considerations and proposals to reinforce aircraft with heavier defensive armor, such measures were ultimately shelved. The main reason for this decision lay in the severe limitations imposed by weight constraints. The additional armor, while potentially offering better survivability, would have made the aircraft less maneuverable, sluggish, or perhaps unable to operate effectively from available bases and carrier decks. As the war drew to a close, aircraft designers faced the reality that these challenges could not be overcome within the existing technological and logistical framework, leading to the abandonment of those more heavily armored configurations. The remarkable cooperation between different branches of the military, specifically coastal command units and military intelligence agencies, served as an exemplary model of joint operational effectiveness during this era. This collaboration was especially vital in executing a series of highly successful operations involving the TETSI system, a term that referred to a specialized aerial platform or weapon designed for precise targeting. The coordination was facilitated by ultra-intercepts, which intercepted and decoded enemy communications, thus providing highly detailed and timely targeting data. Meanwhile, reconnaissance aircraft played an equally crucial role by visually confirming convoy positions on the sea surface, ensuring that strike aircraft received up-to-the-minute information. This synergy enabled strike missions to be carried out with maximum precision while minimizing the risk to friendly forces. This integrated approach exemplified the best of inter-service cooperation, where intelligence gathering and tactical execution were tightly aligned. The training protocols established for crews operating the TETSI system centered heavily on developing expert skills in deflection shooting, an advanced technique requiring the ability to lead fast-moving targets, and range estimation. Pilots dedicated countless hours practicing against mock targets, often called towed targets because of their shape or movement characteristics, which were designed to simulate real enemy vessels. These rigorous training sessions aimed to cultivate a natural, instinctive ability to compute lead distances accurately over long ranges, an ability traditionally associated with naval surface warfare, where ships engage each other amid complex maneuvers, rather than aerial combat. This emphasis on precision and rapid calculation was necessary because the success of long-range gunnery depended on the pilot's ability to correctly anticipate the target's future position, often in challenging weather or at great distances. The concluding combat operation involving the TETSI system took place on the 5th of April in the year 1945. During this mission, Mosquitoes, likely a designation for a particular type of attack aircraft, launched a series of strikes against German surface ships within the operational area identified as the Kattegat. During this attack, 5 vessels were sunk, including an additional vessel designated a spare Breer, which was lost along with all personnel aboard, emphasizing the system's devastating effectiveness even in the conflict's waning days. These successful strikes demonstrated that, despite the proximity to the end of hostilities, German naval forces remained vulnerable to the TETSI weapon system, which proved capable of inflicting significant damage. The 57mm shells fired from these aircraft struck their targets with remarkable precision, despite the frantic and often desperate defenses mounted by the enemy, a testament to the sacrifices and professionalism of the attacking pilots. Analysis of ammunition expenditure records, meticulously kept logs of rounds fired versus hits scored, revealed an impressively high hit rate for the TETSI aircraft. For every 3 rounds fired at naval targets, approximately 1 struck its mark. This remarkably high efficiency was a testament to the system's design and the skill of its crews, confirming that the original concept of making aircraft equipped with precision strike guns was correct. Despite the limited production run of the TETSI weaponry, these operational statistics served to validate the approach, demonstrating that conventional guns could achieve highly accurate and devastating strikes when utilized correctly and in a well-coordinated manner. This found support in the observed results, which at times surpassed expectations for aircraft-mounted guns during wartime. The human factors incorporated into the development and operation of the TETSI system reflected a meticulous attention to crew safety and efficiency. Special pilot restraints, advanced harnesses, and seat modifications were introduced to prevent injury during firing sequences, which generated powerful recoil forces that could otherwise cause discomfort or harm, Shoulder harnesses were reinforced and designed with longevity and strength in mind, ensuring pilots remained secure during these intense moments. Navigators, meanwhile, received additional padding to protect against impact with other cockpit equipment, especially during the violent pitching motions experienced each time the guns fired. These design adaptations underscored the complex interplay between weapon performance and crew endurance, ensuring that personnel could operate effectively under combat conditions without risk of avoidable injuries. German wartime propaganda sought to downplay the threat posed by the Tetsi system, claiming publicly that these aircraft and their weaponry were largely ineffective against well-defended convoys. Such statements aimed to provide reassurance to civilian populations and enemy morale alike. However, internal communications within the German Navy revealed a starkly different reality. During the course of the conflict, specialized aerial tactics evolved significantly, particularly with the development of advanced gunnery systems that required pilots to have unobstructed sight lines to targets situated at considerable distances at which traditional bombing methods would typically rely on radar guidance. This necessity meant that these operations could generally only be carried out during daylight hours and under weather conditions that allowed for good visibility, thus imposing operational limitations. Retrospective interviews conducted after the war with German naval personnel revealed lingering psychological effects associated with the use of such weapons, especially the SETC system. These insights indicated that the impact extended well beyond the actual engagement dates. Even crews who had never personally encountered these aircraft continued to harbor fears based on the recountings of survivors, which had helped cultivate a mythos surrounding the weapon. Such stories often exaggerated its effectiveness and haunted enemy imaginations, surpassing the actual number of times the weapon was used in combat. A crucial aspect of the evaluation of this weapon system was the cost-effectiveness analysis performed by the Air Ministry. Despite the considerable expenses involved in modifying aircraft and training specialized crews for its operation, the SETC program demonstrated remarkable value. It succeeded consistently in damaging or destroying high-value targets with minimal aircraft losses, outcomes that validated the strategic concept even as the military gradually shifted focus towards newer armament technologies, such as rockets. Archived technical documentation from Mullins Company provides detailed insights into the rigorous testing processes employed to perfect the automatic loading mechanisms used in the SETC system. These procedures involve firing thousands of rounds in ground tests, each component subjected to destructive testing to ensure durability and reliability under combat stress. Only after passing these exhaustive tests was the system deemed fit for deployment in live flight operations, reflecting meticulous engineering and quality control. The broader influence of the SETC program extended into subsequent aircraft development initiatives managed by British designers. Its success prompted considerations for heavy gun armament across various aircraft types, aiming to achieve a combination of speed, range, and structural strength required to employ such weapons effectively. Nonetheless, it was only the Mosquito aircraft that truly embodied the ideal balance of these attributes, enabling it to successfully utilize heavily armed configurations in combat environments. Intelligence efforts by German agents sought to uncover details of the SETC system through clandestine recruitment attempts at Mullins manufacturing facilities. Agents operating under Abu clandestine networks offered substantial sums of money in exchange for technical data pertaining to the gun's mechanism. Despite several close calls and efforts by British security services to foil these infiltration attempts, no significant leaks occurred. The operational doctrine cultivated around SETC deployment emphasized patience and precise targeting, instructing pilots to maintain an optimal firing range rather than engaging in aggressive maneuvering. This approach relied on the aircraft's speed and the protective buffer of distance to evade enemy fire, trusting in technical performance rather than reckless close-quarters engagement. Statistical analyses of mission reports reveal that the aircraft equipped with the SETC system achieved their highest operational success rates when functioning in pairs. One aircraft integrated to suppress enemy anti-aircraft defenses, while the other targeted primary objectives, a tactic that maximized the limited ammunition capacity and reduced the exposure of both aircraft to return fire. This coordinated pair-based strategy represented a significant tactical innovation designed to enhance effectiveness and survivability. The eventual discontinuation of the SETC program in early 1945 was driven by shifting operational conditions. As the threat posed by the U-boat fleet diminished, the need for such dedicated anti-shipping aircraft waned. The military shifted focus toward aircraft capable of supporting ground operations more effectively, with rockets increasingly seen as an adequate and more versatile armament for maritime targets. The transition marked a strategic realignment aimed at optimizing resources and technological developments in the emerging post-war scenario. Finally, an important aspect of the historical assessment of the Mosquito aircraft's contribution to Allied victory underscores its vital role in maintaining pressure on German submarine operations. Its specialized capabilities allowed it to strike at critical maritime threats, thereby reinforcing the Allied naval blockade and reducing the effectiveness of enemy submarine campaigns. The aircraft's effectiveness in this role cemented its legacy as a pivotal element in the broader strategic tapestry that led to eventual victory. During the critical year of 1944, a tumultuous period marked by relentless naval engagements and rapid technological evolution, the Allies faced daunting challenges in maintaining their maritime dominance. Despite continuous advancements in submarine design and tactics, the emergence of innovative surface vessel types and aircraft capabilities introduced a new level of complexity to naval warfare. This period was characterized by intense operational struggles, particularly as new underwater and surface assets entered service with the enemy, impeding the Allied forces' ability to seize the strategic initiative. The rapid deployment of these cutting-edge boat types complicated countermeasures and tactical planning, making it increasingly difficult for the Allies to regain control of the vital maritime corridors and supply routes essential for sustaining their efforts against Axis powers. In a different, yet equally significant sphere of military innovation, the preservation of the Tetsi aircraft for museum exhibitions proved to be an arduous endeavor. This difficulty stemmed heavily from the classified nature of the Tetsi program, which was shrouded in secrecy during the wartime years. Many of these aircraft, after their brief but impactful service, were either scrapped or subjected to conversion back into standard configurations, thus erasing much of the original equipment's physical presence. Consequently, the historical record of this groundbreaking weapon system is now primarily pieced together through a limited collection of photographs, technical drawings, and declassified documents. This scarcity of tangible artifacts leaves a gap in the physical legacy of the Tetsi aircraft, but underscores its importance as a revolutionary maritime strike platform that momentarily shifted the paradigms of aerial and naval warfare. Throughout the years following the war, veterans of the renowned 248 Squadron continued to gather informally, engaging in reunions to recount their combat experiences and share memories of Tetsi operations. Their first-hand testimonies played a crucial role in preserving the history of this specialized weapon system, offering insights that would otherwise have been lost to time. These veteran accounts serve as valuable historical documentation, shedding light on a subject that for decades remained obscure to the broader public. It was only with the gradual lifting of wartime secrecy and the release of official history records that the true scope and impact of the Tetsi program started to come to light. Such revelations revealed a compelling narrative of innovation, daring, and strategic significance that had been suppressed during the conflict but gained recognition in later years. The broader implications of the Tetsi program extended beyond its immediate tactical successes. It demonstrated a significant strategic lesson that conventional weapons platforms, with appropriate modifications and technological enhancements, could be adapted to meet emerging battlefield challenges without necessitating the creation of entirely new aircraft. This adaptability underscored a cost-effective and efficient approach to military procurement, emphasizing the value of upgrading existing assets over developing specialized, single-purpose designs. This philosophy influenced subsequent wartime and post-war planning, encouraging armed forces to focus on versatile, adaptable technologies capable of addressing a diverse array of operational scenarios. Modern military analysts, reflecting on the historical Tetsi program, recognize its enduring relevance to contemporary anti-ship warfare strategies. Today, standoff engagement, engaging hostile vessels from a safe distance, remains a paramount concern for naval operators seeking to ensure aircraft survivability alongside operational efficacy. While during the Second World War, brief but potent weapons like the Tetsi-mounted guns, akin to the infamous Mosquito aircraft, allowed for startling ship-killing capabilities, modern solutions tend to favor guided missile systems. These modern weaponry provide precise, long-range engagement options, reducing the vulnerability of flight crews and aircraft to enemy countermeasures and extending the effective reach of naval attack units beyond traditional gun ranges. The technological convergence embodied by the Mosquito Tetsi, merging innovations in aircraft construction, artillery systems, and industrial automation, exemplified the spirit of ingenuity that pervaded Allied weapons development during the war. The incredible ingenuity demonstrated by combining existing and emerging technologies created capabilities that adversaries found exceedingly difficult to anticipate or counter effectively. These unlikely combinations of systems exemplified the wartime drive for innovation, where creative reimagining of familiar technology yielded strategic advantages that could decisively tilt the balance of naval power in favor of the Allies. In sum, the Mosquito Tetsi represented a pivotal yet fleeting chapter within the broader chronicle of aerial warfare evolution. Its development and deployment illustrated that sustained innovation, even in a short-lived hardware context, could surmount seemingly insurmountable tactical obstacles. The significance of its successes extended beyond mere destruction of enemy ships. It fundamentally challenged and disrupted enemy defensive doctrines and strategic paradigms. This disruption compelled the enemy to reevaluate their submarine tactics, incorporating new countermeasures and adjusting formations, anti-aircraft defenses, and operational procedures, alterations that, in the end, proved insufficient. The adaptability and reach of aircraft like the Mosquito Tetsi allowed them to strike from beyond the maximum reach of German weapons, rendering many submarine and surface defenders helpless against precision attacks they could neither prevent nor effectively counter. This capacity to threaten and disable enemy vessels from extended ranges contributed directly to the ultimate breakdown of the U-boat threat, a formidable naval challenge, and played an instrumental role in the final victories of the Allies in the